Hello all. In this project I'm going to be creating an inventory system using blueprints in the third person template of the Unreal Engine 5.1. I'm going for something a little bit like Fallout or Skyrim when it comes to the inventory system. So like a list based system rather than some inventory systems you get where it's like a grid. You can drag and drop things on there, rotate, and that's beyond my skill. I might be implementing different tabs for different types of inventory items, such as like consumables, ammo, and weapons, and things like that. But the look of it, to start with anyway, isn't anything like Skyrim or Fallout. It's going to be very basic, so don't expect it to look pretty very soon. The initial scope of the project, it's going to be picking up items, being able to view them in some sort of way in your inventory, to be able to use them, and to drop them. When it comes to equipping items like weapons, that's going to be something in the far future. That kind of stops being an inventory project at that point and starts being a bit of an everything project. You'll have to implement various animations and bring in models from outside of the Unreal 5. So the initial stage of this project will be everything you can get in Unreal 5.1 and the starter content. We won't be bringing anything else in for quite some time. And what I'll try and do is when we get to the stage where we're implementing different animations and bringing in different things from outside the base engine, I'll try to be doing it from free sources and hopefully from marketplace free sources. So if you are following along, then you've got access to those freely and legitimately. A little warning before I start, this is not a tutorial as such. I'm not actually very good at Unreal Engine. I used Unreal Engine 4, some early builds. I built a few little silly things then. It's been a few years since I've messed about with it, so please follow along and have fun. Any suggestions, put them in the comments. If anything I'm doing fundamentally wrong, warn me, and I'll be happy to listen. But there's going to be lots of things I'm getting wrong, and I'll try and put all my faults and all my mistakes on the video itself. I won't be editing those out, because they're learning experiences for me, and they might help someone else as well. So let's get in. So to start with, I'm going to define some small goals. It's a big project, an inventory. It gets even bigger when you add in equipping systems and shooting weapons and things like that later on. So I like to break things down into small bite-sized pieces and concentrate on that piece, get it perfectly working, and then we can move on to the next stage. So what is an inventory? Well, it's somewhere you can hold items that the player has picked up from the world. So we need to be able to interact with items in the world, pick them up, put them somewhere where we can gain access to them later, and they also need to be removed from the world. So the very first thing we need to be able to do is interact with an item. So we'll start setting that up. There's multiple ways of doing that. We can walk over an item in the world and have it disappear and appear in our inventory, just automatically collect things. I'm not going to be doing that at the moment. It might be something else I do later on. It's quite common practice in a lot of games where you walk over ammo or walk over money and it automatically appears in your inventory. So it might be something we can implement, and it's probably a little bit easier than what we're going to go for. So it'd be really easy to throw that in later. So, but to start with, we're going to go with a system where you look at an item and press a button and it picks it up. So we can start with going to our content drawer, finding our third person blueprint. We'll dock that. So none of this we're going to need for now. We'll leave all that alone and find our inaught space down here. One thing I want to do actually is I don't like the camera angle right behind the player. I like it a little to the side and a little bit closer, so we'll change that first. I go to the viewport. Let's move this to the side and a little bit closer. So let's reduce that target arm length. And possibly a little higher as well. Let's try that. I think that's a bit better. Right, so in our third person, we need a way to interact with items in the world. So I think we're going to go for a line trace. Commonly in games, you press E for interacting with things. So I think our interact button is also going to be E. Now there is another way of setting up this event, which we're probably going to do later on. But for now, for quick prototyping, I'm just going to throw in an E keyboard event for this. So when we press E, we want to draw a line trace. Line trace by channel. And what this does, this shoots out a line from a defined point to another point, and anything in that line that gets hit will appear here, and you can get all the information from whatever you've hit here. So we want ignore self on. We don't want to be able to hit ourselves with the line. And draw debug type. We can do for duration. If we scroll down here, we can see that the duration is 5 seconds. So when we draw this line in the world, just for our own sanity, we can check that it's actually going in the correct direction. And it'll show a red line. And when it hits something, after that, it'll show a green line to say something's already been hit. So we need to set up our start and end points. Now the start point's really easy. So we want it from the camera because that's the thing we're controlling to look at things. So we can find world location. So get world location. And plug that straight into there. So when we press E, it's going to shoot a line starting at the world location of our camera. Pretty standard. Endpoint, a little bit more complicated. So we want the endpoint to be in front of us. So we can find the, if I spell it correctly, the forward vector. So now in this, it's telling us which way the camera is facing. It's not telling us how far away we want this line to shoot, though. It's just telling us that the camera is facing this way. This is the point that it's facing to. So that won't actually shoot anywhere if we plug that in. So we want to multiply this by a number. And, no, not yet actually, no, I'm getting that wrong. So multiply this by a number, and we're going to set up a variable for this so we can change it on the fly later. It's going to be an integer, and we'll go for, what should we call it, interact distance. That didn't change anything. So we're going to get our interact distance. We compile, then we can change the default value over here. We'll put 5,000 for now. That's far too long, like far too much of a distance to be interacting with things in a game, but at the moment, during the testing phase, it might be useful that we can interact quite far with stuff. Right, so this gives us the forward vector, but we also need to know which point we need to shoot this from at this distance. So we've got the direction, we've got the distance, but we don't know where in the world we're going to be doing that, but we've got that information here. So we can simply add the two together and plug that into end. And I don't like all these wavy lines. Let's see if we can make it look a little bit nicer. Yeah, I'm not sure that's much better than it was before, but it's going to do. So that should now shoot a line at a given distance. Let's test it. A lot of people might feel quite confident with blueprints and don't need to test as much as I do. You'll see that I test everything I do just to make doubly sure. So we press E and we get a line. And wherever we look, we draw that line when we press E. So yeah, we know that's working perfect. So yeah, now we can look at things, shoot a line at them, get the information of that object. You might have noticed that I'm making an inventory system. This is how we're going to pick up things, but I haven't called it pick up at all. I've called it interact distance, and this E is how we're going to be interacting with everything and anything. So whether it be opening a door, flicking a switch, picking up an item, talking to an NPC, we're going to be pressing E for that. So now we need to know, well, how are we going to be pressing E to do lots of different things? How's the engine going to know that we want to do a particular thing? We're going to send something called an interface message. So we're going to create an interface now. So in the content, I'm going to create a new folder, interfaces. I like to colour everything that I've created in a different colour, just to make it stand out from the default stuff, so I know where my things are. Create an interface, blueprint interface, and we're going to call it interact. No, we're not. We're going to call it interface underscore interact. When naming systems for things are probably completely horrendous to anyone that has any clue what they're doing in this program, but it works for me. I know where to find my things. As soon as we open this interface, we're going to get a function. It already puts one function in there for us. We can put multiple. We're going to start off with just this one, and we're going to call it interact. We're going to put an input on this interact interface message. So when we do send this message to something, that thing has a reference of us, so we can easily send a message back then. So we're going to call this simply player, and the type, we're using the third person blueprint, so object reference to third person character. It didn't work. Yes, it did. Compile that. Excuse me. So we can close this interface now. We're not going to need that for a while. We need to give this third person blueprint the interface. You can't use it at the moment. We need to tell it that it can use it, tell it what it is. So in class settings, interfaces, we can add an interface, and if we search for as, there is interface interact. Compile that, and then we can use it. So we've created that interface. Now we need to know what we can and can't interact with. We don't want to be trying to interact with absolutely everything in our game level. So back to content, create another folder. And call this one actors. We want it green. And let's put another folder in, interactable. And we want an actor blueprint in here. Master underscore interactable. If you've not used master blueprints before, they're quite useful, very useful in fact. So from this we're going to have a master interactable, which we can create a child blueprint from, and all the code we put in this one will be included automatically in all the child blueprints. So we can set up some code that we want all interactable objects to have, and no matter how many interactable objects we create, as long as they're a child of this, or a grandchild of this, they can be quite far descendants, it will have that code automatically, so we don't have to put it in every single one all the time. We can just put it in the one and it's got it. So I've created a child here, as you saw. I'm going to rename that, because after master interactable, a child of master interactable is going to be master pickup, because not all interactable things you can pick up, but all things you can pick up are interactable. So that's why this one is a child of that one. So we can put some code in there, and it will tell us, it will tell everything we can pick up after how it's used. So if we put the code in there to add this to the inventory, we don't have to put in everything individually. Oh, compile. Right, so we've got our line trace. after we've hit something with our line, we want to check if it is something we can interact with. So we're going to break the hit results. This gives us all sorts of information about the thing we've hit, the location, the distance, everything. The hit actor is what we want, and we want to cast this to master interactable. And what this will do, it will check if it is an actor that we can interact with. And if it isn't, let's do print string, and we'll say not interactable. So if we can't interact with it, this will appear on the screen, not interactable. And then that interface we created. So we have the interact, and the target is this thing we've hit. So it's the master interactable thing. And that's what we're sending the message to. Remember, we set up the player reference on our interact interface. So that's here. We need to define what that is, which is easy. It's just a self or reference to us. So a quick recap, we're going to be shooting a line trace from this location to this location, and if it hits anything, we're going to check if it's a master interactable. If it is a master interactable, we are going to send a message to the interactable saying we are interacting with you. And we're also sending information about who we are. Interfaces are great because we can send this to lots of things and they can all treat this differently. So we're doing the same thing over and over again. We're pressing E all the time, but the thing that we're interacting with can take this and do something different with it. So if it's a light switch we're interacting with, it can turn the light switch on or off. If it's a pickup of some kind, then it gets picked up. If it's anything else, it will just behave how you code that particular thing while we're doing the same thing. Right, so now in our master pickup, we're going to make this interact after we've fired this off. This is pointing at the master interactable, but because our master pickup is a child of the master interactable, it will still send that message to the pickup as well. So any descendant of that master interactable will get this message, as long as we give it the interface. So class settings for this, like we did with the third person blueprint, interfaces. In fact, we probably want to do that in the master interactable. So class settings, interface interact, compile. And because we put it in the top level blueprint, the master interactable, that will go down to every child class as well. Alright, so third person blueprint is sending this interact message to whatever it's hit. And this master pickup, we are going to look for event interact there. And this is where that message is received. So again, we've got the player thing that we set up. What's this thing going to do when we interact with it? So to start with, to make sure that we are interacting with it, we can just simply remove it from the world. So destroy. It's something we're going to have to do at some point anyway. Because when we put something in our inventory, we would technically destroy the thing that's in the world, and when we want to remove it from our inventory, we respawn it. So just to make sure we are definitely interacting with this thing, let's destroy the thing we're interacting with, which we haven't got one yet. We need to create another blueprint. So a child of the master, we're going to create a test blueprint. So a child of the master pickup, we'll just call this test pickup. And for our line trace to have any effect on this, it needs a structure of some kind. So let's put a cube in there. Move this cube up so it's in line with the floor. And we'll put a few of them in our world. And we'll test it out. So if I press E over here, you can see in the top left it says not interactable everywhere I'm pressing it, because these aren't interactable objects. Now these, in theory, should destroy now. Yes. Alright, so we got to the stage where we're removing things from the world. We've got no access to them after that, though. They just disappear. There's no reference to them in any way. So we'll destroy this. That was just the test. In every object, it's useful to have a reference to the player. Now we've got it here. Right, it's always going to be there. We're always going to have this interact message here. But we might as well, to make life easy for ourselves, promote it to a variable. And the variable is called player. I'll call it player pickup reference. And then if it's used anywhere else, if we drag it into another blueprint, we know exactly where it's coming from and where it was set. So back in the third person character, I think our interface, we can create another message. So if we find our interface, which is in interfaces, let's add a function called pickup, and we'll add an input on that, and this function is going to be from the master pickup item, and it's going to be sending a message back to the player to say, you've tried to interact with me. The way you interact with me is by picking me up. So to give a reference to itself back to the player, we are going to have a master pickup object reference. Pickup. What should we? Object to pick up, actor to pick up, actor to pick up. Compile that. So after it's set the player, we're going to have pickup, target, self. Oh, sorry, target is the player. We're sending this message to the player, so we need to target, needs to know where it's going. And the act to pick up is going to be self. That is telling the player to pick me up. Compile that. And back in the third person blueprint, we can call that event now. So event pickup. So once the master pickup has fired this off to the player, it's going to fire this one. So what we're going to do, well, to start with, we can test that message again with the same means. We can destroy it. Yep, destroys it perfectly. So what do we want to do? How do we want to pick this thing up? So I think first of all, if we promote that to a variable, act to pick up, yeah, we'll keep that name, and it is of the type master pickup item, and we want to save this in our inventory, which are going to contain lots of master pickup items. There is a variable type in this where we can do that. So promote to variable, and let's break these. In fact, let's delete that, find it there. This little icon here, we can set to array. So now this can hold multiple variables of a type, and they're all the master pickup item types, so we can hold loads of master pickup item types, and we're going to save all our pickups into there. it's not something we're going to use initially. Setting up a few things for later on down the road and saving them all in an array such as this will be really helpful when it comes to saving and loading games. All we need to do is save that array, and we've got all our inventory. And then when it comes to loading the game, we take everything from that array, run it through the same code that we've got set up for our inventory, and it'll re-add it to our inventory, if you like. So I call this inventory array. Oh, saved while I was typing that. So we're going to get the inventory array. We don't want to set it. We're going to get it and add to it. And the thing we're adding is this act that we're picking up. All right, and again, let's test it. So we're going to print string on this one. And in that string, we're going to have this. And that's going to tell us how many things have been added to this array, this integer here. We haven't got a destroy thing on here, so it's not going to be destroying them as we go, and they're going to stay there, but the numbers at the top left of the screen should be going up as we're shooting our line trace to them. There we are. The numbers on the top left are going up. So we know these are all being added multiple times to the array. So what do we need to do next? So we're interacting with the objects. We know how to destroy them, although we don't have that set up yet. We are saving them somewhere. We need to be able to access them, I suppose, in some way. We need an inventory screen. Okay. So I'm going to move these. Oops. Move these out of the way because these are things I'm not going to use for a long time. But this I'm probably going to use now. It's the event begin play. So I don't want to mess with anything that's already on there, so I'm just going to put a sequence. And then bring this down, and we need to create a widget on begin play. This is going to be our inventory widget, which we have not actually created yet, so let's go and do that. Content drawer, content, widgets. So right click, user interface, and widget blueprint. User widget, yeah. We're going to call it widget underscore inventory. And we're just going to put a border in there for now. We're going to need a border anyway. So border, I'm going to make sure that that is working. So widget inventory. A few things we need to do to make sure we can see it on the screen. One, it's created, but it just exists in limbo right now. It's not actually anywhere, so we need to add to viewport. In fact, before we do that, we're going to be coming back to this inventory widget a lot, so we'll promote to variable inventory widget. And we're going to add it to the viewport, and we're going to set visibility, and we're going to set it to invisible, or hidden, sorry. We don't want to start the game and have our inventory instantly visible, do we? Right, down here, yeah, I'll put it down here. We need a way to open and close our inventory, so I quite like using tab for this. So you can use I or any other button you like, but I'm going to use tab. I'm going to flip-flop this. If you don't know flip-flop, the first time you press tab, will fire everything from the A. Second time, it will fire from the B. Third time, it will fire from the A, and so on. It'll flip-flop between them. We need to get our inventory widget. And when we press tab the first time, we need to set visibility. Let's try it from there. Set visibility, there we are. Let's duplicate that. So when we press A, it needs to be visible. When we press A again, tab again, it needs to be hidden. Compile. We test this. There we go. There's our inventory. Very fetching. I told you it wouldn't be pretty to start with. Right, so we have our inventory widget popping up, but it's not doing anything because there's nothing there. It's not adding these to the widget because we're not telling it to. So if we go to our inventory widget, first, I don't like it being a block color like this. Let's make it slightly transparent. So let's get the alpha and move that down. There we go. So I want the inventory on the left-hand side, like a list of things on the left-hand side. So we need a horizontal box to start with, then a scroll box. Right, scroll box is really small. We're not going to see much information there. So we can use a size box. Put that in our horizontal box and put our scroll box inside the size box, and then we can do a width override and make that bigger. That'll do. I think we can have our list of inventory items down here, and then over here we've got room for descriptions, pictures, maybe things we've equipped or something like that. We can look at that later, but we've got a lot of room to play with anyway. This scroll box, we need to add things as we pick stuff up, so we want it as a variable. And we'll call it inventory scroll. And now it'll be accessible in our graph. Here it is on the left-hand side. Excuse me. Third person character, we've picked something up. We've added it to the inventory array. And now we want to tell our inventory widget to do something, don't we? So I'm thinking about this, and I think if we create another widget, we're in the widgets folder, so user interface widgets, and we'll call it widget inventory item. All right, double click on that widget, and if we just give it a button, because it's already programmed in to be able to interact with that button. We've got all these events on here, on clicked, on pressed, on released, and all sorts. So that's already programmed in for us. That saves us some hassle. Then when a message gets sent to the widget inventory to put something in this scroll box that we've made, we can put buttons in there, and these can be our inventory items. But we have to tell this widget to do that. So I think a custom event. Would it be a custom event? Yeah. Add inventory widget. So when this event is fired, which will fire from the third person character, when this event is fired, it will create a widget, and we want to create one of those buttons, don't we? So it's the inventory item. So when this event is fired, it's going to create an inventory item, and in the scroll box we want to add a child. There it is, and it'll add this new widget as a child of our scroll box. Now we need to fire this event, because at the moment it's not actually being fired from anywhere. Inventory widget, we should be able to get the custom event from here. Add inventory widget, call function. This is gonna work visually right now, but the inventory widgets that it's creating have no relevance at all to the actors that are being picked up. We're not sending that information there. So I'm going to check this process works just to put those inventory widgets inside our inventory scroll box, which I think it will. Bang, bang, bang. There should be a load of them in there when we press tab. Yeah, they're there. So you can see when we press more, there's loads. So our logic on that is correct. But we do need to be sending some information to this inventory item button. That's the best way to do that. I'll cut away for a second then. I've spent a little bit of time thinking about this, and there's quite a bit here that's not okay. We're going to change. So we're going to create a struct which we'll be saving lots of information on, and I'll show you what a struct is now. Let's create another folder. So blueprints and structure is there. What should we call it? Struct. Pickups. So it's a structure for all pickups, and in structures we can add as many variables as we want, and each item is going to have all these variables. So we can have our first one, which can be something simple like name, and it is the item name. We can add another one. Where's the add button? Oh, there it is. Sorry. Description, which will also be a name, I think. Text, what's the difference? We'll keep it as a name. Then some things we're going to implement later, we can put one of them in now. So we can have master pickup class reference. Reference to self. So this class reference is going to be what we use later when we drop the item from our inventory. We can respawn the item using this class reference. And I think that's all we need for now. This struct, this is where we'd be putting the weight of the item. If we're going to have a weight-based system, we'd be putting things such as, is this a consumable, is it a weapon, and all the information about this item in that sense will go in the struct. Then later on there'll be other structs as you go down the list. So guns will have a struct on maybe their range, type of bullets they use, fire rate and things like that. That'll all be included in another struct. But everything we need to know about picking up and dropping this item and holding this item in our inventory needs to go in this struct. For now, item name, description and reference to self is all we're going to need for a little while. So close that, and master pickup, this is going to need this variable. So variables down here, item struct we'll call it, spell it a bit better than that, I think. And it's going to be of the type item struct. So pickups, sorry. Yeah, we'll change that name to batch. Let's make this visible so we can modify it in the world. Then I think every inventory item button needs the same variable. Just pick up, wasn't it? Right, so now we can get the information from the item we're picking up and get it to this inventory item widget. So they do contain all the relevant information for the item. I think, yeah, we just got to figure out a way of getting it to the button there, which isn't difficult. We just maybe have to go through a blueprint to get there, or at least one blueprint. Does mean that this array, let's get rid of everything here, get rid of you for a second. I think this array doesn't need to be an array of actors now. It needs to be an array of structs. So we can change this to pick up structs, get inventory array, add now this item being picked up, it should have access to its struct. There it is, get pickup struct. So we're adding that pickup struct to this array, and every time we pick up a new item, it will add its own unique pickup struct to this array, and then later when we're loading the game, we can access all the pickup structs from here, and that's all the information we need about all the items. We don't need to save individual actors in there. In fact, I think I was getting it wrong by saving individual actors in there, because if I save them in there and then destroy them from the world, which we were going to do, presumably they're not in there anymore because they've been eradicated. I think that's how it would work. So I was on the wrong track anyway by making those actors. This I'm going to leave as the actor we're trying to pick up, just so we've got reference to what we're actually trying to pick up at that given moment. I don't know if we're going to need it again, but it can't hurt anyway. It's something we can remove later. So we pick up something, we shoot the line at it, we find out it's an interactable, we send an interact message to it, that goes to the master pickup, sets the player reference there, sends a message back saying yeah, pick me up, fires off here, we save the actor in this thing that we're picking up variable, and we get the struct from it, we save it in an array, and then we send a message to the inventory widget saying, yeah, make a button for it in your inventory scroll, which fires here and it creates that button. What I'm going to do is change this custom event. I've got a habit of making custom events and then they don't actually work, or not quite what I want, so let's get rid of that custom event. Go back to our interface. These are so useful interfaces for blueprint communication. So we've got interact, we've got pickup, and I think now if we have one called add to inventory, we have two inputs on this one. I think we're going to have our usual player input, so third person object reference, so that refers to us, and then we're going to have our pickup struct. So we can send that information from our player to the inventory widgets. Struct pickups, there we are. Compile. Right, inventory widgets, class settings, interfaces. Right, so we've added the interact interface to inventory widget now. So we should be able to add item. Ooh, that didn't work. Add item to inventory. Oh, add to inventory, there it is. Right. So it's going to add item to inventory. It's going to be fired from the third person character when we pick up something. It's going to create the widget, add it to the, create the inventory item widget, add it as a child to the scroll box so it appears in there. Also, we can, from here we can get struct, get pickup, set pickup struct, sorry, that's what we want to do. So now the item we're picking up, it's struct information, which is also duplicated inside the inventory item widget, can be set. Pickup struct. I thought it could be set like that. Have I done something stupid in the interface? Yes, I have. Third person blueprint. Struct pickups. That's all we want, isn't it? Right. Compile. Now we should be able to plug that in there. Yeah. Okay, so, and reference to player. I suppose we're going to need that at some point. Promote the variable. So the inventory knows who the player is. You seem backwards to me. Never mind. So, right, that should be it for the inventory side of things. Now, third person player, compile, what is wrong with you? Get pickup struct, add it to there, right. We need to fire off that interface now, don't we? I can't remember what it was called. What was it? Add to inventory. The target is the inventory widget. Oh, I didn't want it. Right, target is the inventory widget. Player is self because we're in the third person blueprint right now. And the pickup struct is you. think that logic is sound. So press E. Sorry to go back through all this again. This is how I make sense of things in my mind. Like I find it difficult to like start halfway through. I have to follow the whole process. It could probably get quite long-winded, and I will cut it down a little bit as we go. So we press E, we fire our line trace. We know that works. We know all this bit works. We send a message to the object we're interacting with, just simply saying interact. That object at the moment is only a pickup because we haven't got any other objects we interact with. That pickup sets a variable of who the player is and sends a message back saying pick me up. We go back here and the character's been told to pick it up. So it sets a variable. Again, I'm not sure if this is needed at the moment. Sets a variable, gets the information, the struct from that item, saves it in an array with all the other items that it's picked up, and sends a message to the inventory saying we're picking something up. You need to put it in your inventory. So inventory widget gets that information, which is here. So item add to inventory. Saves the player reference again. It creates an inventory item widget, which currently is just a button. It gets the struct information from that button. Sorry, it sets the struct information within the new widget that's being created and sets it to the item that's being picked up. Then it adds that new widget as a child of the scroll box in the inventory. I don't know why I pressed play there. Cancel. Compile. Right, we got a compile error. We'll clear it. Oh, no we haven't. No. I think that was just me pressing buttons too quick that come up with a compile error. Let's play. Let's see what happens. Boom, 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 boom. Yep, got 4 buttons in there. I'm confident that it's working how I want it to, but we're not actually testing if the struct is being passed over to those buttons. So they're there, but are they returning that information? Do they have that info in there? So I would like a way of testing that. And one thing we're going to have on those buttons, at least one of the initial things, is some text. A text block in there. And just saying what the item is. So we need to make that text, we need to bind it. So let's create a binding. And we want to get the pickup struct, break it, and get the item's name, shall we? First, let's not do that. I don't want to see what wording is currently on these without binding it to anything. There's no text at all. Okay. Right. And then let's add that binder. There is text, so the binding does something, but none is what it does. It's not really telling me that it's. Well, the item name is none. If we change the item name here, does this work? That's a thing, and this one is another thing. Another thing. Right, let's try that. Yeah. Okay, it's working. So all the item data, the item structs, is being passed along. That's good news. As you can see, I'm running around while the inventory's up. So We obviously haven't enabled cursor yet, so we can cursor over these buttons and do anything with them. But we have made, I think, a decent amount of progress. We've got some objects in the world that we can interact with, that we can pick up. I need to add this destroy actor command, so we're removing them from the world. But as we've seen throughout the video, that's a pretty simple thing to do. We're just going to make sure we do it at the right time. We don't want to be destroying the actor before we've saved everything we need to save from it. We're adding some inventory items that we can see. They have names. We know we're saving that information in our inventory of these items. So I think that's a good place to leave day 1 or episode 1. Then in episode 2 we can add or enable mouse cursor and stop character input and things while the inventory is open, and then we can interact with those things that are up on the screen there that says thing, another thing, and all that. We can make sure that these things are destroyed from the world when we pick them up, and then we want to be able to drop them, so respawning them. A part of that will be completing the item struct data, because at the moment the only things that are saved in the item struct are these ones that are in the world, because I've manually added the names in. We want to, in master pickup, have a system, maybe in the construction graph or event graph on begin play, that sets all the variables within the struct automatically. Not quite sure how to do that yet, but a part of that's going to be reference to self for the class part of the struct. If we break the struct, where are we? Reference to self, master pickup class reference. So that's where we're going to be respawning the things from. So we want to be able to make sure that's set, and the item name and description is set as well, because currently we're not doing any of that. But okay, that's the end of episode 1. Any questions, leave them in the comments and I will answer them in due course. But I don't have any subscribers, so I'm guessing there won't be very many questions. Thank you.